I took one look at Caleb's face and knew something was wrong. His eyes were glazed over, his jaw clenched tight. "Caleb, your father was in a serious accident. He fell off the roof while fixing it." He barely reacted, just a slight raise of his eyebrows. "What do you want me to do?" "My conference call is starting." I couldn't believe his indifference. "He's in critical condition. We need to go to the hospital." Caleb waved a dismissive hand. "Honestly, it saves me the trouble of dealing with his crap." My heart sank as he turned away, already focused on his laptop and that stupid call. I grabbed my purse and hurried out, tears stinging my eyes. What happened to the man I married? At the hospital, a grim-faced doctor updated me on Walter's condition: traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding. It didn't look good. I tried calling Caleb during his lunch break, but he didn't pick up. When he finally came home that evening, I confronted him. "Your father could die, and you didn't even show up." Caleb loosened his tie like my words meant nothing. "I have a client dinner tonight. Handle this yourself." The callousness in his voice made me sick. "He's your family, Caleb. Don't you care at all?" "He always belittled me," he snapped. "Now his retirement funds can finally become mine." I stared at this stranger before me, realizing our marriage was already dead. The man I loved was gone, replaced by this cold, greedy shell. As I lay awake that night, I knew things would never be the same. Over the next few days, Walter's condition remained critical. The nurses filled me in on the gruesome details: brain hemorrhaging, collapsed lungs, and severe internal injuries. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was Caleb checking in, but he never called. Finally, I caught him during his lunch break. "Caleb, it's your father?" "The doctors say it's really bad." There was a long pause before he replied, his tone flat. "Look, Hazel, I don't have time for this right now. Can we talk later?" "Don't you even care?" I cried, my voice cracking. "He could be dying." "We both know my old man's a fighter," he said dismissively. "I'm sure he'll pull through." I wanted to scream at him to make him understand how much pain Walter was in, but Caleb had already checked out of the conversation. That night, I waited up until well past midnight, the house dark and silent. When Caleb finally strutted through the door, I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "There you are," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your father's hanging on by a thread at the hospital." Caleb shrugged off his suit jacket. "And? What do you want from me, Hazel?" My mouth fell open at his indifference. This was his own flesh and blood. "I want you to act like you have a heart," I shouted, "to show some basic human decency and compassion." Caleb's gaze turned ice cold. "You know how my father treated me growing up. He got what he deserved with that fall." I recoiled, horrified by his cruel words. In that moment, I saw him for the monster he truly was. As the days went by, I split my time between work and the hospital, holding vigil by Walter's bedside. Caleb didn't so much as call or visit once. His selfishness and greed had fully consumed him. As the weeks dragged on, memories of the past kept resurfacing. I recalled the tense family dinners when Walter would grill Caleb about his grades and career ambitions. No matter how well Caleb did, it was never enough for his domineering father. "You need to toughen up and stop being so sensitive," Walter would bark. "The corporate world won't coddle you." Young Caleb would shrink back, lips pressed into a thin line as he nodded obediently. But I saw the resentment flickering in his eyes, anger simmering just beneath the surface. Now, sitting by Walter's bedside, I couldn't help but connect the dots between that childhood trauma and Caleb's disturbing indifference today. Had his father's emotional abuse irrevocably damaged their relationship? My friends tried convincing me to cut Caleb loose. "He's shown you who he really is, Hazel. Why are you still putting up with his crap?" Part of me knew they were right, but another part, the part still clinging to the man I fell in love with years ago, couldn't let go so easily. The hospital staff saw my internal struggle play out daily. "You can't keep running yourself ragged like this," the nurses would gently chide me. "If you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to take care of him." Reluctantly, I started scaling back my hours at work, despite the looming deadlines. If Caleb wasn't going to step up for his own father, then I would have to shoulder that responsibility myself. A few days later, during a routine visit, one of Walter's eyes fluttered open while I was sitting next to him. "Walter?" I gasped, grabbing his hand. "Can you hear me? Squeeze if you can." His battered fingers twitched ever so slightly against my palm. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly replaced by dread over how to break the news to his callous son. I tried calling Caleb right away to share the good news about Walter, but he didn't pick up. Not that I was surprised at this point. When he finally sauntered in around midnight, I could tell from the sly grin on his face that he'd been out with his slimy coworkers again. "Where have you been?" I demanded, hands on my hips. "I've been trying to reach you all evening." Caleb poured himself a scotch, not even looking at me. "Just out with the boys, blowing off some steam." "Well, your father's condition has changed," I said, hoping to finally get a reaction out of him. "He's regained consciousness." Caleb paused, the glass halfway to his lips. For a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of something in his eyes. Surprise? Concern? It was quickly extinguished by a callous shrug. "I'm sure the old man will milk this for all it's worth," he muttered before downing his drink. My jaw went slack at his unbelievable insensitivity. How could he be so heartless towards his own family? The next few days passed in a painful funk. Caleb continued his neglectful behavior, stumbling in at ungodly hours reeking of alcohol and perfume that definitely wasn't mine. Then one night, he didn't even try to be discreet. A ledgy blonde in a tight red dress waltzed right in after him, giggling drunkenly. "Who is she?" I gasped, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Caleb draped his arm around her shoulders. "Hazel, meet Linda, Linda Monroe. The woman, Linda," smirked at me like we were rivals. "Nice to finally meet you." You've been cheating on me?" I sputtered, struggling to process the betrayal. "Guilty," Caleb said with a shameless grin. He tossed a manila envelope at my feet. "Sign those divorce papers and you'll be free of me for good." The room started spinning as I opened the envelope with trembling hands. There it was in black and white. Our marriage was over. Just like that. In the days after Caleb dropped that bombshell, I felt numb, like I was moving through a waking nightmare. I poured all my energy into visiting Walter at the hospital, if only to escape the suffocating misery at home. To my relief, Walter's condition was slowly improving. The nurses said he was responding well to treatment and could likely be discharged to a rehab facility soon. I tried sharing these hopeful updates with Caleb, but he just scoffed and changed the subject. Then one afternoon, as I was sitting by Walter's bedside, his eyes fluttered open again. This time, they focused on me with startling clarity. "Hazel." His gravelly voice was little more than a whisper. I grasped his hand, fighting back tears of joy. "I'm here, Walter. You're going to be okay." He squeezed my fingers with what little strength he had. "I'm not blind, you know. I've seen how Caleb's been treating you, and me." My heart sank as I nodded mutely. There was no use denying the truth anymore. Walter's expression hardened. "He's planning to take everything once I'm gone, isn't he?" "Yes," I admitted quietly. "He served me with divorce papers the other night, said it would free him of his burden." Anger flashed in Walter's eyes, giving him a sudden burst of energy. "That ungrateful little—" He trailed off, sucking in a pained breath. I leaned forward, squeezing his hand again. "What is it? What were you going to say?" Walter fixed me with an intense stare. "Not if we play our cards right, Hazel. Are you with me?" I didn't hesitate. After everything Caleb had put us through, I was done being a helpless victim. "I'm in. What did you have in mind?" A faint smile tugged at the corner of Walter's cracked lips. "We're going to take back what's rightfully yours and leave that scumbag son of mine with nothing." Over the next few weeks, Walter and I hatched our plan in hushed conversations at the hospital. He insisted on keeping things discreet until the time was right to strike. Finally, after being discharged to a rehab facility, Walter gave me the green light. "Get Caleb and that mistress of his over to the house this Saturday. I want to see the look on their smug faces." I tried to mask my nervousness as I called Caleb that week. "Hey, your father wanted to have us all over for dinner on Saturday. You know, one last family meal before the old man kicks the bucket?" Caleb finished with a snort. "Yeah, I suppose we can humor him. Linda and I will be there." When Saturday evening arrived, Caleb strutted through the door with Linda clinging to his arm, both of them looking completely at ease. My stomach twisted into knots seeing them like that in my home. "All right, Pops, we're here," Caleb announced as they sauntered into the living room. "What's so important that you—" He trailed off, eyes widening, because there was Walter sitting upright in his wheelchair, staring them down with undisguised contempt. You're awake? Caleb sputtered. Walter's mouth curled into a cold smile. Surprised? You really shouldn't be. I raised you better than this, Caleb. Or so I thought. Caleb and Linda exchanged a panicked look as the blood drained from their faces. Clearly this wasn't the feeble, helpless old man they were expecting. What's going on here? Linda hissed, clutching Caleb's arm. Walter turned his withering glare on her. Miss Monroe, I suggest you exit this conversation before it gets truly unpleasant. She opened her mouth to protest, but Caleb silenced her with a shake of his head. Smart man, knowing when to fold. What do you want from us? Caleb asked tightly. Isn't it obvious? Walter replied. I want to avoid having my entire life's work, my legacy, inherited by an ungrateful, dishonorable snake like you. Caleb's face turned an ugly shade of red as Walter's words hit home. For the first time, a flicker of fear entered his eyes. What are you saying? He demanded through gritted teeth. That you're cutting me out? After everything I've done for this family? Walter barked out a harsh laugh. Done for the family? Don't make me laugh, boy. You've been working against us this whole time with your selfish scheming. Caleb opened his mouth, but I cut him off, suddenly feeling emboldened. Don't even try denying it. We know all about your shady dealings at the law firm. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out a thick manila envelope and tossed it on the coffee table with a thud. Bank statements, phone records, everything implicating you in financial misconduct and misappropriation of client funds. Caleb went deathly pale as he stared at the damning evidence. Linda was gaping at him in shock and horror. You set me up? Caleb wheezed, turning to his mistress. Is that what this is? Linda quickly shook her head, backing away from him. No, Caleb, I swear. I didn't know any of this. I felt a pang of satisfaction seeing the panic in her eyes as she realized her little fantasy world was crumbling. That's not all, son, Walter interjected coldly. There's also the matter of my will. Caleb's head whipped around so fast I thought his neck might snap. Your will? Indeed. Walter straightened up in his wheelchair. A recent amendment stating that in order to inherit my assets and my share of the construction business, you must be considered in good standing with the family. He let that bombshell linger for a moment before delivering the killing blow, which, after the way you've treated Hazel and me these past months, you most certainly are not. Caleb looked like he'd been gut-punched as the realization set in. Not only had he lost his inheritance, he might be facing criminal charges and disbarment as well. You can't do this, he sputtered weakly. But the fight had already drained from his eyes, replaced by the hollow, empty stare of a man who knew he'd lost everything. The divorce proceedings with Caleb were thankfully swift and clean. He put up little resistance, likely realizing how damning the evidence against him was. Within a matter of weeks, that chapter of my life was officially closed. As for Linda, well, let's just say she didn't take too kindly to being deceived and used as a pawn. I overheard a nasty confrontation between them outside the courthouse, her shrill voice echoing off the stone walls. You lied to me, Caleb. About everything. Your money, your future, all of it. His reply was little more than a pathetic mumble. Linda, baby, you've got to understand. Don't baby me, you scumbag. We're through, completely through. The clicking of her heels faded away, leaving Caleb alone with the wreckage of his selfish decisions. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction seeing his world crumble. In the months that followed, I focused my energy on getting the family construction business back in order. Walter had fortunately reversed course just in time, amending his will to leave me as the primary inheritor and trustee. You're the only one I can trust to do the right thing, Hazel, he told me gruffly. Though his body remained frail, there was a renewed spark in his eyes. This company was my life's work. I want to see it restored to its former glory. With those words etched in my mind, I rolled up my sleeves and dug into the company finances. Needless to say, years of Caleb's unchecked greed and mismanagement had taken their toll. But I was determined to right those wrongs, no matter how daunting the task. I made the tough decisions, downsizing, restructuring, even selling off certain assets to get us back on solid footing. All the while, I kept Walter looped in, knowing his sharp eye for detail would help guide us. Slowly but surely, the renewed spirit of integrity began permeating every level of the business. Jobs were completed on time, clients were satisfied, and our reputation started to rebuild. Sadly, Walter didn't live to see the complete revitalization. But in his final months, I made sure to keep him involved every step of the way, knowing how much this all meant to him. "You've made me proud, Hazel," he wheezed one afternoon, grasping my hand with what little strength he had left. "Finally putting things right like they should have been all along." Tears blurred my vision as I leaned down and gently kissed his forehead. "For you, Walter, and for me, for a fresh start and a legacy we can be proud of." My breath caught in my throat as I opened the door. There stood my ex-husband Ellis, as infuriatingly handsome as ever, and next to him his imposingly stern mother, Lorraine. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, blocking their entry. Ellis flashed his signature dazzling smile. "Aren't you going to invite us in, Bryn?" I crossed my arms. "Absolutely not. How did you even know where I lived?" Lorraine huffed indignantly. "We asked your sister, though I can't fathom why she'd tell us after how dreadful you treated our Ellis." My jaw dropped in disbelief. The audacity! I straightened my back and met Lorraine's glare. "You have 10 seconds to explain yourselves before I call security." "Bryn, dear, no need for threats," Ellis interjected gently. "We merely want to discuss our living arrangements now that the unnecessary hostility from our split has faded." "Living arrangements? Is he serious?" He stood there perfectly poised in his designer suit, as if this were a business deal. I almost laughed at the sheer lunacy. "Ellis, if you think for 1 second that I'd ever allow you back into my life—" "We understand you're still emotional," Lorraine interrupted, "which is why Ellis and I have decided I will move in as well temporarily to ease the transition." Transition? Now I knew they'd lost their minds. I stepped forward, backing them towards the elevator. "Let me make this crystal clear. There is nothing to transition back to. We are divorced." Ellis's smile faded, his voice taking on a hint of steel. "Don't be rash, Bryn. You may regret it." "A warning? From him?" My temper flared. "The only thing I regret is wasting years married to you. Now get out before I call security and the police." I jabbed angrily at the elevator button. The doors slid open and I motioned brusquely for them to leave. Ellis hesitated, then stepped in, Lorraine close behind. As the doors began closing, Ellis called out, "Remember, Bryn, you forced my hand." I caught my breath, pulse racing. Forced his hand? The veiled threat hung in the air. I had no doubt Ellis was ruthless enough to follow through if I didn't act first. I strode rapidly back into my condo, locking the door. I wouldn't put it past them to try to re-enter while I was distracted. I poured myself a shaking glass of wine, equal parts furious and unnerved. So this was Ellis's endgame. He likely assumed the divorce left me broken, expecting me to cave to his demands. He always did underestimate me. I downed the wine in one long swallow. Well, not this time. If it was a war Ellis wanted, then it was war he would get, and I refused to lose. I downed my second glass of wine, still reeling from the morning's confrontation. Ellis's parting words haunted me. Forced his hand? What exactly was he planning? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lorraine. "We need to discuss this further. Expect us at 7 p.m. "The hell you will," I shouted at the phone. I fired off a reply. "Do not come here or I will call the police. This is harassment." Her response was swift. "Don't be dramatic. We just want to talk." "You owe it to Ellis after everything you put him through." I threw the phone down in disgust. Everything I put him through? The years of subtle neglect, the selfishness, the cavalier infidelity, that was all on him, and his viper of a mother encouraging it every step of the way. No, this little visit was the last straw. I wouldn't sit back and let them bulldoze over me anymore. If Ellis wanted war, I would bring it right to his doorstep. I began gathering every sordid detail I could on Ellis. I called old friends, colleagues, anyone who I thought might have dirt on him, and dirt I got. Ellis's law partners hinted at shady financial dealings. Old flames alluded to affairs. I even learned of recent harassment allegations from his young, attractive assistant, Jenna. My anger burned hotter with each new discovery. Not only was Ellis a cheating snake, but a ruthless, corrupt one at that. By 5 p.m., I had compiled a stockpile of incriminating evidence. My phone buzzed again. My mouth twisted in disgust seeing it was another message from Lorraine. "We'll be there at 7 whether you like it or not." I have already made up the guest room for Ellis. My son deserves to be comfortable. Comfortable? I would make sure he and his despicable mother were anything but. At 6:55 p.m. sharp, I headed down to the lobby, a satisfied smile on my face. Right on cue, the elevator doors slid open. Lorraine strode out first, her pinched face set in a haughty sneer. Ellis slunk behind, his eyes widening when he saw me waiting for them. Before either could speak, I held up a hand. I have had quite enough of this little charade. If you try and harass me again, I'll make sure you regret it. I locked eyes with Ellis. You have no idea what I'm capable of. His cocky grin faltered. I pressed my advantage and stepped forward, glaring menacingly. I promise you, keep this up, and I'll bring your entire world crashing down. My voice shook with rage. Without waiting for a reply, I turned on my heels and left them gaping speechlessly. I had declared my war in no uncertain terms. I almost pitied Ellis. He had poked a sleeping dragon, and my fury was just beginning to wake. I arrived at my lawyer's office, files in hand, ready to launch the opening salvos of my war against Ellis. His threats still rang in my ears, fueling my determination. If he thought I would just stand by, he was dead wrong. Bryn, always a pleasure, greeted Jacob, my seasoned attorney. We exchanged quick pleasantries before I eagerly presented my findings. I wanted to wipe that smug grin off Ellis's face permanently. This is quite an impressive dossier, Jacob remarked, pages spread across his desk. Extensive evidence of financial malfeasance, sexual harassment allegations. He peered up, eyebrow raised. Do you intend to pursue legal action? Absolutely. I want to hit Ellis where it hurts. His money and his beloved career. My voice dripped with contempt. I'll bleed him dry if I have to. Jacob clasped his hands, eyeing me seriously. An aggressive approach, but not unwarranted given the circumstances. He detailed a crushing lawsuit targeting Ellis's assets and law license. My pulse quickened as he described levying accusation after accusation, toppling the empire Ellis had built on lies. I left Jacob's office charged with predatory purpose. The battlefield was set, and I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. Ellis had awoken the beast inside me, and I would have my revenge. That evening I received a series of desperate texts from Ellis. We need to talk. Lorraine is frantic. She invested her life savings in my latest development project, and now the funding has collapsed. We're facing financial ruin if I can't access additional capital right away. Please, I'm begging you. I stared coldly at his groveling messages. Ruin? He didn't know the meaning of the word. But he would soon enough. Bryn, please. Lorraine refuses to speak to me. You know how she gets. I swear I'll pay you back once this deal gets back on track. Sneering, I began typing a response when my phone suddenly rang. It was Ellis, likely calling to pathetically plead his case further. What? I answered sharply. Bryn, thank God, Ellis's voice wavered desperately. I know things ended badly between us, but you must help me. Must help him? I almost laughed at his audacity. In the background, I could hear Lorraine's shrill voice. If you can't fix this, Ellis, you're no son of mine. I'd heard enough. Ellis, our relationship died the second you betrayed our marriage vows the first time. I want nothing more to do with you or that harpy you call a mother. The line went silent except for Lorraine's strangled gasps. Good, let them drown in panic. Please, Bryn, Ellis implored weakly. I'll tell you exactly what you can do, Ellis, I interrupted. You can sign these divorce papers and terminate all contact. Maybe then I'll consider not ruining what's left of your career. Checkmate. The battle lines were drawn and my artillery was locked on target, now to fire at will. The silence on the line felt endless as I awaited Ellis's response. Finally, in a broken whisper, I heard him utter, "As you wish, I will sign the papers." His defeated words were sweet satisfaction. I promptly received the signed divorce decree, granting me a clean break along with a substantial settlement befitting my suffering. As an added bonus, Ellis included a sworn affidavit confessing to multiple infidelities. My lips curled maliciously reading his written admission of guilt. It would come in useful later to annihilate any remaining sympathy for him. I decided to also pursue action against his law license. Just because I had won my freedom didn't mean Ellis deserved to walk away unscathed. His beloved career would be the next casualty in my war against him. Over the following weeks, Jacob and I meticulously prepared complaint letters to the State Ethics Committee documenting Ellis's confessed adultery and chronicling accounts of his shady financial dealings. This will undoubtedly trigger an official investigation based on the severity of accusations, Jacob commented as we finalized the exhaustive records. It won't be pleasant for him. These committees rarely show mercy, especially with the hard evidence we're providing. Good, I thought, coldly. Let him be raked over the coals. He didn't deserve mercy or even basic compassion after what he did to me. Soon after submitting the complaints, I received satisfying updates of their swift and devastating impact. Ellis was placed under immediate review at his firm and barred from taking on new clients amidst the swirling accusations. Lorraine also kept involuntarily involving herself, as I knew she would. She left me endless raging voicemails when the ethics investigation was announced, blaming me for trying to destroy Ellis over nothing. Destroy him? Oh, I was just getting started. Her shrill accusations only strengthened my resolve. When Lorraine finally had the nerve to show up pounding at my door, I quickly put her in her place. "This is all your fault, you deceitful bitch," she screamed when I opened the door. Before she could spit anything else, I stepped forward and struck her sharply across the face. She staggered backwards in shock, eyes filling with tears. "Get the hell out, and if you ever come here again, the next slap will draw blood." I spat vehemently, slamming the door on her stunned face. Immediately, I filed for restraining orders against the both of them. I wanted the protection of the law to cement my separation from their toxicity. In the following weeks, every update Jacob sent regarding Ellis's deteriorating reputation and mounting legal troubles filled me with fierce satisfaction. With each judgment against him, with each damning headline, I could practically hear the foundations of his world cracking and crumbling. Good riddance. He was finally getting what he deserved. As I stood on my balcony overlooking the dazzling cityscape, I raised my wine glass in celebration. The view now perfectly symbolized my hard-won victory, rising high above the ruins of Ellis and Lorraine, exactly where I belonged. The sharp clack of high heels in my marble foyer pulled my eyes from the jaw-dropping view. I turned with a scowl, assuming it was Lorraine again attempting to barge in despite strict security protocol. But my glare transformed instantly to shock when instead I saw Ellis's young assistant Jenna striding towards me, fiery determination in her eyes. My surprise quickly shifted to anger. "How the hell did you get in here?" I demanded. She waved a keycard dismissively. "I have my methods, but that's not important." "Breaking into my home sure seems pretty damn important," I retorted. Ignoring me, Jenna declared, "I'm here to discuss Ellis." That got my attention. I crossed my arms skeptically. She took a breath. "You should know, Ellis and I are seeing each other. Have been for a while, actually." Seeing each other? Why wasn't I surprised? Ellis always did have a penchant for screwing young subordinates. First his pathetic associate at his old firm and now his new assistant. Despicable but almost impressive in the sheer audacity. I raised an eyebrow. So the harassment claims against him were what? Foreplay? Jenna flushed angrily. "No, I really was upset with him at first. The way he pursued me was so aggressive and manipulative." Her voice trailed off. Interesting. I wondered what lies Ellis had fed her to get into her pants. Jenna finally met my gaze. "But over time he made me feel so special, like I was the only one who really knew the real him, you know?" I stared at her blankly. Oh, I knew the real Ellis, all right, a selfish, sneaky scumbag. But I bit my tongue, curious where Jenna was going with this sob story. Haltingly, she continued. "The point is, I think I love him, and I want to help fix this situation with you and his mother." Fix this? I almost burst out laughing. There was no fix for what Ellis had done, but Jenna's hopeful eyes stopped my bitter response. "Ellis says if you two could just talk," she trailed off hopefully. Now I did laugh harshly. "Jenna, listen closely. There is nothing on earth that could convince me to willingly speak to Ellis again." I sighed, seeing her face fall. "I know you think you see something special in Ellis, but take it from his ex-wife. That man doesn't have a sincere bone in his body." Jenna's lip quivered. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Clearly Ellis had spun an expert web of lies and empty promises, just as he had with me years ago. Straightening sharply, I opened the door and motioned for her to leave. Go find someone who treats you with genuine care, Jenna. Ellis isn't capable of that. Her eyes watering, Jenna hurried out without another word. I firmly shut the door behind her. Sighing deeply, I leaned against it for support. Oh yes, Ellis certainly had a type, young, naive, and vulnerable. Well, his new plaything was about to get a brutal life lesson about the true ugliness lying underneath Ellis's polished veneer, a lesson I knew all too well. In the weeks following Jenna's unexpected visit, I immersed myself in work, trying to forget the latest absurd drama. I had just secured a major promotion, validating years of tireless effort. I wouldn't let Ellis undermine all I had achieved. That resolve wavered when I arrived home one evening to find Lorraine lurking yet again outside my building, still somehow evading security. Her piercing voice cut through the night air before I could avoid her. I hope you're satisfied with yourself, she seethed. Ellis is at risk of losing everything because of your petty grudge. Petty grudge? I marched up to her menacingly as she continued her tirade against me, jabbing her bony finger in my face. I'd had enough. With one forceful shove, I knocked her back against the brick exterior. She yelped painfully. If you harass me again, they'll be carting you out of here in a body bag, I growled through gritted teeth. Stay the hell away from me. I stormed off, leaving Lorraine sputtering furiously. My phone soon buzzed with her incensed texts. When Ellis finds out about this, it will just further motivate him to destroy you at any cost. Good luck with that, I thought acidly. Though the threat gave me pause, I knew Ellis was ruthless enough to make good if desperate. Over the next week I learned things had only gotten worse for him professionally. The ethics investigation was in full swing, more sordid details emerging, including confirmation Ellis had pilfered client funds for his failed developments. Partners were fleeing his firm and creditors were hounding him relentlessly. His personal life fared no better. Jenna had moved out abruptly, presumably finally waking up to reality. Ellis was unraveling rapidly. When I arrived at my office one morning, my receptionist's uneasy expression immediately put me on edge. What's going on, Gwen? She wrung her hands nervously. There's someone waiting for you. Jenna, she's extremely upset. Jenna again? What now? I hurried to my office to find Jenna sobbing uncontrollably, mascara streaking her inflamed face. Jenna, what happened? I asked warily. It's Ellis, she choked out. I went by his place to talk, and he was just destroying everything in a drunken rage. She buried her face in her hands as a fresh wave of hysteria overcame her. I sank down beside her and spoke evenly. Jenna, listen, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. I recounted my own painful history with Ellis's vindictive anger. Jenna lifted her head slowly, eyes widening with revelation. Oh my God, Bryn, I am so sorry, she whimpered. This whole time I thought you were just vengeful, but now I see Ellis clearly for the monster he is. I nodded gravely as she divulged new information on Ellis's violence and manipulation against her, cementing his abusive patterns. As Jenna composed herself, we agreed to coordinate with authorities on appropriate restraining actions. For her sake and mine, Ellis needed to face consequences. The law was about to get its claws in Ellis in more ways than he ever imagined, and I would not relent until he was shredded to pieces. I observed with quiet satisfaction as two uniformed officers firmly led a disheveled and belligerent Ellis down the precinct stairwell in handcuffs. His bellowing denials echoed through the cavernous atrium. Once outside, Ellis collapsed against the cruiser, appearing on the verge of hysterics. Good, I thought coldly, watching the bizarre scene through the station windows. Let him finally experience even a fraction of the torment he had so callously inflicted. I had coordinated closely with Jenna as well as Jacob to pursue immediate legal action against Ellis for assault, abuse, and violations of our restraining orders. The detailed accounts of his violence and manipulation left authorities with little recourse but to arrest him. That gratifying image was just the beginning. Over subsequent weeks, I was regular fixture at the courthouse, bearing witness to the comprehensive dismantling of Ellis's life. The ethics committee convened intense hearings, pouring through reams of records I had supplied confirming not just Ellis's adulterous behavior, but willful professional misconduct. Account statements showed substantial sums Ellis had funneled from client estates into his own failed ventures. An open and shut case of embezzlement. I observed silently as Ellis took the stand, clamoring fruitlessly to defend himself. The prosecution interrogated him ruthlessly until he crumbled, admitting defeat. The slimy Ellis I had known had vanished, replaced by a shell of a man, broken and destitute. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The final nail in the coffin came days later. Formal notice of Ellis's disbarment. No more practicing law ever again. As Jacobs reviewed next steps, including potential jail time based on criminal financial charges, I saw years' worth of anguish finally lifting. I had won. Leaving the courthouse, I practically floated down the steps before a shrill cry of despair jarred me. Lorraine. In my satisfaction, I had almost forgotten about her. I watched, curious, as she desperately shoved through the crowd of reporters searching for Ellis. She finally spotted him retreating hastily towards a waiting town car. "Ellis!" Lorraine cried pitifully, chasing after him. "You can't abandon me! I gave up everything for you." Ellis yanked the car door open angrily. "You and your foolish ambitions got me into this mess. I want nothing more to do with you," he spat venomously. The car sped off, leaving Lorraine standing alone, crestfallen. My heart almost went out to her before I swiftly quashed the thought. She deserved this too for enabling Ellis at every turn. I strode straight past Lorraine's hunched form without a word. I had finally excised their poison from my life completely. Glancing back, I saw Lorraine turn slowly, her sunken eyes meeting mine one last time, filled with pain and true understanding of betrayal. I held her gaze indifferently, then shifted away. The hot sun beat down on me as I departed, but I had never felt such lightness. True justice was done. Now to live my life wholly and completely free. Sighing deeply, I sank back into my office chair, basking in the glow of a radiant sunset, bathing downtown in golden hues. I glanced contentedly around the spacious corner suite, a visible testament to my professional successes since leaving Ellis's toxicity behind. I had swiftly risen through the executive ranks to spearhead major marketing campaigns that propelled our firm to record profits. Recognition followed, including well-deserved promotions and industry accolades, affirming my strong leadership vision. Gone were the days of simmering resentment and emotional turmoil that had defined my marriage to Ellis. In its place now stood confidence, self-assuredness, and clarity of purpose. I embraced my seat at the table and reveled in hard-won autonomy. The board was even grooming me for an imminent CEO role, acknowledging my instrumental role in recent triumphs. My throat tightened unexpectedly with emotion. God knows Ellis and Lorraine would have ruthlessly exploited my position and earnings for their own selfish agenda, just as ruthlessly as they had our marriage. Now there were no parasitic ties hindering my ascent. I had clawed my way to the top alone on sheer grit and refusal to be defeated. And I was just getting started. A light rap at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I waved my assistant Devon in cheerfully. His amiable competence and organization were indispensable. "Here is the market analysis you requested," he said, handing me a freshly bound presentation. "Also, your guest has arrived downstairs." I smiled broadly, heart quickening. "Excellent. Send him up, please." Moments later, I heard a firm knock. I opened the door to find Ryan standing there, looking striking as ever in a tailored suit, his warm brown eyes crinkling into a smile as he gave me quick kiss. His stable warmth was exactly what I needed after years wedded to Ellis's turbulent chaos. We reconnected by coincidence when Ryan joined the firm's legal team, finding chemistry still lingered from our college days. An easy rapport quickly blossomed into a blossoming relationship on my terms and timing. Ryan was more than willing to accommodate, showing genuine care and respect. No pressure, no suffocation, just unwavering support. I invited Ryan to sit on the plush sectional and popped a celebratory bottle of Dom Perignon I had been saving for this special milestone. I regaled him with the latest positive developments, confidence growing with each effervescent sip. Ryan listened attentively, interjecting words of encouragement and pride in my accomplishments. I realized suddenly I hadn't felt this secure in my entire adult life. Ryan wrapped his arms around me reassuringly, as if reading my thoughts. No, with him I had found an equal partnership, one grounded in trust and healthy boundaries, the very foundation Ellis had torpedoed. Gazing out at the glittering skyline abuzz with possibility, I nestled contentedly into Ryan's sturdy embrace. The sweet taste of triumph filled my mouth, more rich and satisfying than the finest champagne. I had awoken from the nightmare years ago. Now at long last I could bask fully in the dawn of blissful new beginnings.